I had a good friend who was a Santa Claus in a shopping mall. He was only in his 20s, so he was rather young for that role. But he was absolutely great at it. His hair was prematurely white. He grew a long beard, and he was a little bit heavy set. And he took this role very seriously, and he knew it carried a ton of responsibility because throughout the year, children would come up to him and just stare at him and wonder, is that him? Could it be? Why aren't you at the North Pole? He'd always smile and kneel down and say, how are you doing? It's so good to see you. I once asked him what the hardest thing was about playing that part, and he said very seriously, it is the wishes that I can't fulfill. Because he said that every Christmas season when he played Santa, it was inevitable that a child or two would find their way to his lap. And my friend would ask them, what do you want for Christmas? And the child would say, I want mom and dad to be together again. Or, I wish grandpa was still alive. Those wishes always got to him, he said, and all he could do was give that child a hug and assure them that they were loved no matter what. So some Christmas seasons are more significant than the latest bright, shiny object that can be purchased. We always say that we want goodwill on earth and peace on earth and goodwill to all, but some days the peace and goodwill we wish for can feel very far removed from reality. Everything we've been through in the last few years as we've navigated COVID and all that's happening with wars raging in Ukraine and Gaza, all we see every day in the news and on social media, the things that illustrate our social and political divides, the accumulation of all these things that can weigh heavily on us. These days, our Christmas wishes are loaded with more freight. We know that in record numbers, people, including people we know personally, people we know and love, are suffering from anxiety and fear and depression. Many folks are suffering through the long-term health consequences of COVID. Many are grieving the death of a loved one. So this season, when we're expected to be joyful, it can be a cruel and lonely time. That's especially true if you've experienced the loss of someone you love, a parent, child, spouse. It's so often the case, if that's true, you have an overwhelming sense of if only. If only I could have them back for just a moment, I would tell them what they mean to me. Because maybe I didn't express that enough. But too often I took for granted the time I had with them. And if I had one wish, it would be just to hold them one more time and say, I love you. So maybe one outcome of Christmas this year and any year can be that our Christmas wish and our reality will be to appreciate the loving relationships we have and to pledge never to take them for granted. Now, we're all familiar with the four Gospels of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but for the first 400 years of Christianity, give or take, before the Bible took shape in the way that we've come to know it, there were actually several other accounts of the life of Jesus. One was the Gospel of James, which had a lot to say about Mary, the mother of Jesus. Now, even though the Gospel of James was left on the cutting room floor, so to speak, when the Bible was put together, it had a huge influence on Christianity and what people came to believe about Mary. And one of those details in James has to do with the exact location where Mary was visited by the angel Gabriel to be informed that she was pregnant with Jesus. We're told in James that it took place at a well where Mary was drawing some water. Even today, you can visit the city of Nazareth in northern Israel and pay a visit to Mary's well. popular spot to go and take a selfie, hang around and see if Gabriel might even appear and surprise you with some rather startling news. I happened to go there over 30 years ago, and although I didn't encounter Gabriel, one thing I could not help noticing was all the coins that people drop into this well. I even dropped a coin in there and made a wish. I mean, why not? Seemed like the thing to do. People have been wishing as well at wells as long as anyone can remember. And as far as wishing wells go, well, Mary's well seems like a pretty safe bet. But the very idea that a wish might be granted at a well came from the ancient belief that water contains mysterious spiritual power, or that it is a gift from God. After all, water is a source of life, and it's often a scarce commodity, especially in an arid area of the country or the world, such as Israel. And making an offering of some kind, tossing in a coin while you're making that wish, it feels like you have some skin in the game. It's a personal sacrifice of sorts to prove that you have faith that wishes can come true. Now, we have no idea if Mary herself ever made a wish or tossed a coin into that well, but if she did, it's safe to say she never would have wished to be a pregnant, unmarried woman in first century Palestine. Because no one in their right mind would wish to become a social pariah and be kicked out of their home for bringing shame on their family, or to be assumed to have been in an adulterous relationship. But as the story goes, after first being a bit skeptical and confused by the angel Gabriel's announcement, Mary comes to understand that there is something going on that is a bigger deal than her getting pregnant. And being pregnant's a pretty big deal, even without all those social complications. And by the way, I know I'm not the only person who reads this story that Joe read and thinks to themselves, what an awkward conversation. Gabriel, think about it. Gabriel just pops in from out of nowhere and says, hi, Mary, don't be afraid. In fact, it's your lucky day. You're going to have a baby. And he launches into a long, passionate, flowery speech about God and thrones and a kingdom that has no end. And how does Mary reply? You know I'm a virgin, right? Gabriel then says, oh yeah, we know how that usually works. We've got it all figured out. Don't you worry about a thing. It's going to be great. And Mary says, well, if you say so. And then poof, Gabriel's gone. We just get used to hearing Bible stories like this, but they can be really crazy stuff. Anyway, sitting there and pondering all of this in her heart, my heart goes out to Mary, even knowing that things turned out just fine on that first Christmas day. But at this point in the story, think about it. She just went out that day to get a pail of water, and now this. Even if you have doubts about whether the events leading up to the birth of Jesus took place exactly as they're recorded in the Gospels, what matters here is not whether this story about Mary and Gabriel falls into the category of myth or reality. None of the Gospel writers ever pretended to be historians. They were storytellers, and the big story here is about a wish coming true. It's a Christmas wish. A wish that people had way back then and that we continue to have today. And it's the wish that God has for all of humanity and all of creation and has had ever since the world came into being. Our ultimate wish and God's wish, they're one and the same. Above all else, in a world that's very often hurting and broken and imperfect, where the inexplicable happens every day, where we've been conditioned. We've conditioned ourselves to believe that injustice and racism and homophobia and sexism and poverty and addiction and immigration and wars and the climate crisis are problems that are just way too big for us to solve. And when we're more connected than ever, but more lonely and afraid and suspicious of one another than ever. Our wish is for a word of hope and the freedom of peace, the rapture of joy, and the reality of love. Our wish for ourselves and everyone else is belonging, acceptance, and value, and dignity, and meaning, and purpose. Is that too much to wish for? No. As I said, that's God's enduring wish for us too. And that wish comes true when we recognize in our own lives the unexpected arrival of God at any moment. The God who announces, no matter what happens, don't be afraid. Something wonderful is happening in your life that is binding your destiny as a child of God with the life and destiny of everyone, everywhere. The hope, peace, joy, and love that you seek, the belonging, acceptance, value, dignity, meaning, and purpose you need to live fully, is found in loving one another as I have loved you. It's so simple. Simple as a baby being born. That is very, very special. A baby filled with all the possibility and all the potential and all of the love that is invested in every life. That is God's wish for us, that we believe all things are possible. And if we treat one another and care for one another and cherish and love one another as we would that holy child, God's wish for you and for me, our wish, comes true. Amen.
On this day, Christmas Eve, we gather now and we will gather again this evening.